All right, well, I made it a little bit further down the Beltway, and here I am around the back of the Washington Temple of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And this is on the back side, over in the distance there. Might not be able to hear it, but the Beltway traffic is zooming by, and this is sort of on a hillside lot. I think it's 50-something acres. And it goes down to, there's a park, sort of a park and a creek down there that I drove by on the way in. And so you've got these sort of contemplative benches and a lot of flowers, annual bedding plants, not particularly native plants, but, annual bedding plants all in amongst here. The building was was finished. I think it was planned, was started in 1968, and I think finished in 1974. And supposedly, I guess it has six. It says it has 6 towers, although I'm not seeing all 6. Maybe you can only see 3 at a time, or 4 at a time on either side. That it's the tallest spire. I think it's the tallest among all the spires, and that this structure was the first one that was built on the East Coast since 1846, when the Temple of Nauvoo was finished. So, and then I guess the next one was in Georgia. And so on the bench here, this is the middle bench, I've made my little heart. This is a stone I picked up on the side of the parking lot under a magnolia tree, and I think it has looks like it's a stone that has some stories to tell, and an anemone that I picked up, and just some of the grass I used. The fern was from yesterday on the walk, and the evergreen, I snipped a bit off the parking lot. And then the little blue, those are like little thistle-y kinds of things that were in a bouquet I had, but I thought they were quite lovely. You can see I've got the dandelion there. And I have a friend who was telling me about the Pleiades, the 7 sister stars. So I had 7 little thistles, so I put the stars in there like that. And so this is sort of the overall area. I will just point out that this whole walk, it goes all the way around the building, and it's all lined in boxwood. So we've seen quite a bit of boxwood again. It's also southern, but very Anglican, sort of 18th century English gardens. So the boxwood separates you from sort of the natural area beyond that. The nature has one sort of look, and then the manicured bedding plant has another sort of look. Evidently inside, even though it looks like these walls are solid, there are areas that are this is Alabama limestone, and that it's been in some places shaved down to about 1/2 inch thick. So it's translucent, I guess, so the light goes in, even though the building doesn't look like it has a lot of windows. And on the encyclopedia, or the Wikipedia entry, it had a description of the interior, and it mentioned something about these hexagonal, I don't know if they're actually rooms, but there was a hexagonal motif the other day about the artificial heart, the Jarvik artificial heart being connected to Salt Lake City. And I just reconfirmed that. It was developed at the University of Utah. And I guess the first person who got an artificial heart, they lived like 112 days afterwards. And so I think that's just the beginning of these sort of artificial organ transplants, and this idea some people hold that we're going to have these 3D printable organs, and that's part of this radical life extension program. And I keep leaving my heart's places, and I think just again to reaffirm the natural heart and the natural aspect of life, not to try to short circuit people, circuit, that's a terrible way to say it, but not to diminish people who have major heart issues. But I think the idea that we would, unless without dire need, start to exchange our organs for printable kinds or some sort of enhanced organs, that's kind of wild to think about. So I mentioned behind the boxwood hedge. I think it's also interesting to note that this temple is located in Kensington, Maryland, and Kensington is a sort of Anglo name, and Kensington Palace is one of the royal residences, and it's also in a garden setting, so we've got this garden setting. And as I was walking through, I saw several monarch butterflies flying in. So, and I haven't seen a lot I've seen more yellow swallowtail butterflies than the monarch. So I saw at least 3 different monarch butterflies in the gardens today. which I took note of. So I don't have a whole lot more to say about this. Again, I think through all of my research and the fact that the Human Genome Project, had that really important meeting at Alta Ski Resort above Salt Lake City, and the vast investments of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that they have made in technology and biotechnology. And, for me, this also loops into the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, and that he had sort of a relationship, at least informally, with certain members of the church, and that these things always seem to be popping up nearby. I know, in San Diego, the San Diego Temple is really nearby the Biotech Center at UC San Diego, and in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Temple is really close to where the first internet message was sent at UCLA to SRI International. And there's a lot of really close interconnections between members of the church and state intelligence and technology, and it feeds into this, at least it underpins, I think, the thinking of the Mormon Transhumanist Association and their idea that it is God's expectation that we use technology to become more than human and raise the dead and other sorts of things. So these are all things I think we should be talking about more prominently out in the open before the horse is out of the barn, but before it actually jumps on the highway, we should talk about it some more. So again, this is a beautiful setting. The temple itself is quite abstract. They just built a temple in Philadelphia that I would say is probably a similar size. Our temple, I was thinking it would actually be much bigger. On the highway it looks giant, and it's substantial for sure, but it's not quite as big as I thought it would be. It's much more modern. Philadelphia's is very colonial, and this is a much more modern aesthetic. It predates it by 40 years or so. But yeah, I guess this sums things up, and just we have our little heart here. Let's see. There's the heart, not the Jarvik 7. So I'm just sitting down, taking a break before the next spot, which will be Greenbelt, and eating a couple of overripe bananas from our week's trip, and reading through this We Are Power by John Trudell. And my friend in Seattle sent me this, and I love it. And I've torn off bits and pages to leave as intentions along the way. But it's still pretty intact. And I was looking through and I read a section that I think is really relevant, because one of the presentations we saw at the Mormon Transhumanist Conference was about these new molten salt nuclear reactors. And these are I think, thorium reactors, and they're going to be sold to us as sustainable and green. And, they can come up with all the radioisotopes that we need to cure cancer. And that's the stuff that Mark Andreessen's pushing. And, I was in the Santa Fe airport, and there was this older retired guy who saw my book on Life Atomic and wanted to tell me all about these nuclear reactors. And, clearly that was one of the featured elements in at the Blockchain Mormon Transhumanist Conference, because I think they want to create these little tiny villages, these cybernetic villages of smart cities, and get you all hooked up with the sensors and run them on nuclear power that will just top you off with your needed radio upgrades, right, for the radio eugenics program. And so when I was reading through this, I saw that he actually references nuclear power in energy. And so I wanted to read this before we left here. So when we talk about the other side in energy, we can only place so much responsibility on the shoulder of the enemy. And we do have an enemy. We can call him Jimmy Carter or Ronald Reagan, or we can call it the Trilateral Commission. We can call them anything we want. But we've got to come to the reality that they are the enemy, because our friends and people who love us wouldn't do this to us. And so they are the enemy. But we have to deal with this reality, the enemy. There must be this consciousness that goes into our minds, and we will start to act accordingly. And we must know what responsibilities we must place upon the enemy and what responsibilities we must take upon ourselves. Because when we talk about the energy crisis, we must also remember that we are energy. We are energy. So we must, if we are going to go with this truth and spiritual connection behind us when we stand against our enemy, and we accuse the enemy of misusing energy, and we accuse him of abusing it, then we better think real hard about how we misuse it ourselves, because we are energy, and we have to deal with that. We are energy, and it is how we use ourselves that allows the enemy to misuse us. This resistance and this struggle for survival must be total, absolutely complete. There are no half measures. They have interfered in our lives since the moment we were born. Look at America. You have to pay to be born, and you have to pay to be buried. And that tells you a lot about freedom. And if they've got it into our consciousness to accept that, then we've got a lot of work to do. We really do. But we have the ability to change it because we are a natural part of the earth and because we are here. The earth did not put useless things here. We are a natural part of creation. And so, yeah, we are energy. I think they understand how powerful we are as energy, and they're seeking to tap that. They're seeking to use their nanomechanical systems, their biotechnological systems to code us in sensors and piezoelectric energy harvest and smart materials and call it sustainable and shame us if we don't go along with that program. But I think our intrinsic energy is the energy of the heart, right? The energy of the heart, the energy of the aura, our biophotonic beingness, and the imagination, love and imagination. I think that's what we have to work on. So, yeah, John Trudell, I do believe he was definitely a voice for this particular time.